I don't think you can say the word witch without an image popping up in our minds of a woman in a pointy hat, perhaps with a crooked nose, warts, and a big black cauldron. This is the traditional image of a witch that we were taught from childhood fairy tales and Halloween costumes. This picture is, however, wrong. That picture is a more modern creation and has very little to do with the older beliefs in magic and witches in the pre-modern Scandinavia. I will not go into where the image of a witch with a pointy hat comes from here. That has been done in a great video made from Abby Cox in her video A Dress Historian Explain the History of Witch Hat. Nor will I go too deep into the witch process in the different Scandinavian countries, because that is a topic all of itself and can be spoken about for hours. But to talk about witches is to talk about the persecution of women, so there is no help but to get into the witch trials a bit, especially since in the most Nordic countries the laws about how to prosecute a witch was a bit different than most of Europe, where Iceland and Finland perhaps stick out the most. The witch trials was based on folklore and the common beliefs in magic, but they are at the same time not the same at all. They are fused together and impossible to separate, even if they are at the core two different things. Does it sound confusing? Yeah, it is. In all of Scandinavian countries, just as in the rest of Europe, there has always been a belief in magic and people practicing magic, long before Christianity came into the picture. There are sources from ancient Greek and Rome that speaks about people that have been put on trial for using magic to hurt others. This was not different in Scandinavia. We don't have that much written source of the use of magic, but we do know that there were runes that were considered a form of magic, and that seidr, or seid, sorcery in plain English, was an intricate complex world for the Vikings. It seems like men and women both were involved in the practice of this magic, but it seems like the women had a prominent position in this. When Christianity came, the sad fact is that much of this practice was forgotten and has disappeared into history with only archaeological findings for us to interpret. Because according to Christianity, magic was given to people by making a pact with the evil forces and the devil. Here is where it differs a lot between Scandinavia and the rest of Europe. In a lot of other Christian areas in Europe, all kinds of sorcery was bad and forbidden, and was a way of heresy. That meant that even if you did good things with it, it was still considered evil. Again, yes, this is confusing, but this is how it was, because everything that wasn't God's way was evil. That meant that you could be convicted of witchcraft or heresy, as it often came down to, regardless of what you was supposed to have to be doing with it. In all of the Scandinavian countries, up until 17th century, you could only be convicted and sentenced to death for witchcraft if you supposedly had killed someone with it. This might not seem as a big difference, but it was. Until the witch hysteria that came to Scandinavia during the 17th century, there has been very few sources that point to a larger amount of people convicted of witchcraft. Norway was perhaps the worst when it came to the witch trials during the 17th century, with probably around 1,400 people accused of witchcraft and about 350 people executed. 80% of the accused and killed was women. Sweden doesn't come short thereafter. About 300 people was executed here, most of them women. Still, that is less women executed for witchcraft than there was men executed for having sex with animals during the same period. So it might sound like a lot, but compared to the rest of Europe, yes, Germany, I am looking at you, where several thousands and thousands of people were accused and executed, the whole of Scandinavia was not that big when it came to witch trials, except for a short period of time. To be clear, we do not know how many people that was put on trial and executed. Depending on between what years you are counting and what sources you use,
These numbers varies a bit, especially for Norway and Sweden. We are looking at about 50 people in difference, depending on the source you use. So my numbers are not exact, just an approximate number.
Worth mentioning might also be that in Sweden it was most common to execute a witch with an axe first and then burn the body. There is only a handful in Sweden that has been burned alive, even if that, of course, did happen. Finland got caught up in Sweden's hysteria around the 17th century and executed about 115 people, and Iceland only 22 people. What makes Finland and Iceland stand out more is that there was more common to accuse men than women. It seems that in the Icelandic and Finnish beliefs about sorcery and witchcraft, it was a male thing with status. About half of the accused in Finland was men, and only 2 out of the 22 that got executed in Iceland was women. So, what was these women and men accused of? Here is where the actual folklore comes in, and where we can see a clear difference between the Galdar magic and the Seid that was practiced by real people during pre-Christian era, and the imaginary witches that came from the Christianity and their belief in the devil. During the pre-Christian era, Seid was used during wars to give strength to their own side and misfortune to the other side. It was also used to protect you from evil, heal illness, and see the future. As long as you didn't hurt your own people with magic, it was not done in secret and seems to have been practiced more or less in the open. And it also seems to have held status. When Christianity became the dominant religion in Scandinavia, magic was no longer accepted. Medieval Christianity was based upon a very black and white view of the world. God and those who follow his law were the good guys, and the rest belonged to the devil, which was, well, the evil side. All the supernatural beings and powers from the old religion that could not be put under God was therefore associated with the devil and deemed evil. This is why, even if you did good with your magic, it was still considered evil, because you didn't use God's power, you used the devil's power. The witch in Scandinavian folklore turned from a wise and possibly feared but also reverent person that could see the future, turn people into berserkers, and protect you from evil powers, to one who was evil, and the evil power personified, and that mostly did harm. The witch could look like any normal woman or man. There was no need for a wart, a crooked nose, or a pointy hat. Neither was the witch ugly or old. Only way to tell if someone was a witch was to find the devil's mark on the person. All witches got that when they sealed the deal with the devil. It could be a big red or a black spot somewhere on her body, or a spot where she could not feel any pain. This comes back in the torture of the poor accused real women and men, where priests stung them with needles to try and find the spot. We started to use the word häxa, the Swedish word for witch, in the 17th century. And even if we today think of this word as a woman practicing magic, it was a more gender-neutral word during the witch trials. The word häxa probably comes from the word in German hex, and both women and men was called this when they got accused. Before the 17th century, we did not use this word. There was instead various other words for a woman or a man that used magic, usually in a combination with the word troll. For those that have seen my video on Scandinavian trolls, you know that the word troll was used for almost anything that was considered supernatural, magic, unexplainable, and scary. There is no surprise that this word shows up here too. Troll is a rather gender-neutral word, so depending on if it was a man or a woman, you just put a suitable additive word to it. Everyone understood what kind of a man or woman you was talking about if you said a troll woman, trollkärring, or trollkona, or trollman, trollgubbe, or trollkarl. When doing these researches in Scandinavian folklore, I sometimes get the feeling that we were never truly 100% Christian up here. The Christian church had a really hard time beating the old habit out of us, and the male witches on Iceland and Finland is just one example. During the later part of medieval Scandinavia, a more clear form of what a witch was, however, was formed, at least in Norway, Sweden and Denmark. And the fear of witches and magic turned bigger, something that all led up to the horrible witch hunts that came to be during the 17th century. As stated earlier, a witch was a human in league with the devil. Once a year they needed to renew their vows to him, and on the days leading up to Easter, on the eve of Holy Wednesday to be exact, they flew to a place called Blåkulla, which directly translates into Blue Hill. To be able to fly, the witch used a special pot with a special flying ointment that put a spell on some kind of household item, usually a broom, a pitchfork or a baking tray. On Blåkulla they feasted and had extreme orgies, and everything was backwards. They ate with their back against the table, only using the devil's hand, which means the left hand, and they drank from the wrong end of the drinking cup, and they kissed the devil on his ass to seal their contract. Sometimes they kidnapped children and took them with them to this place, forcing the children to partake in this heinous orgies and feasting. This turns up in the witch trials, where children often was the witnesses and the one pointing out the witches with whom they have traveled to Blåkulla with, and also severely tortured women confessing to having been at Blåkulla, telling the stories about the backward feasting and having sex with the devil himself. Well, if you are tortured, you will probably confess to anything just to stop the pain. To keep witches away during this time of the year, people burned big fires and did all kinds of noise to scare the evil forces away. In modern Sweden, there is still a remnant of this belief around Easter, where we still have huge bonfires and set off fireworks around Easter, and children goes from house to house begging for candy and leaving little Easter greeting cards, all dressed up as cute witches. It is a long way from the freckled, cute little witch in modern tradition, from the sex orgies and backward feasting and children pointing out their own mothers or relatives to burn at the stake. But no one said Sweden is a country that always makes sense. I guess you can compare it a bit to Halloween. Today it is more about dressing up as a sexy, slutty nurse, partying or trick-or-treating, than it was from the beginning when you try to protect yourself from evil spirits and inviting dead relatives into your home. Anyhow, to go back to the ideas what a witch were and what they was doing. When witches wasn't kidnapping children to have huge orgies at Blåkulla, they was mostly stealing milk with a hare creature called puke or bjära, also called a troll cat in English. Even if it wasn't always in cat form, it was more likely a ball of yarn or a hare if you ever saw one. Cats have always been connected to witches. Cats, being night-active creatures, was in general considered to have a strong connection to the devil, especially grey and black cats. So witches have always been seen with these animals as their companions. You could say that this could be also a remnant from the old beliefs of the Aesir, where the goddess Freya was known for having a chariot drawn with cats. Freya was also considered to be a goddess that had a lot to do with female power and magic. There are no true proof for this though, so I will set the theory out there, but I can't actually confirm it. Except from stealing milk, witches could put a hex on the livestock for some farmer, make the cows and goats ill, they could cause crops to die, make women unable to bear children, and they can put illness and death upon people that have angered them. You did not want to anger a witch. But at the same time, this was a really good excuse to have when your livestock fell ill, your crops died, and you did not manage to produce a child to your husband that could help carry the farm and family on in the future. It was also a very good way to get rid of a person that you did not like to accuse her or him of being a witch. But witches could also do good things, like heal illness, help with childbearing, and similar. But since it was done with the devil's force, as we already stated, according to the church, this was still evil, and people that took to these kind of shortcuts in life would be punished one way or another, if not in this life, then in death. The horrifying witch trials live on in our memories, and it clearly has made a mark in our minds, because still today we use the word witch hunt when there is a mob throwing false or at least non-grounded accusations against a person or a group. But the church never managed to scare us from wanting to pick up the wand again when the time changes. Beliefs in the witches and magic lives on and has gotten a sort of revival the last decades through the New Age movement, and also, of course, through the religion Wicca that started sometimes around 1940s. Today, the practice of magic is not considered at all evil, and you can't be persecuted for being a witch. The people that today call themselves witches do so once again in the open and are proud of who they are. Evil old witches that kidnap children and put hexes on people has become pure fiction from fairy tales and movies, while the modern version of a witch has, yet again, transformed into something much more similar to what the witch was in the Old Norse society.